Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. Mark, we want to thank you for coming on. As former chairperson, I thought no better person to put the question to you about how people are maximising lean. Before we all get started, I'd ask you to please use the chat function for questions, and I can pose them to Mark as we go through. I want to say thanks to Sen Noreen, who's the admin on this, and to let you all know that this will be recorded and we will be sending out a link to it. Tomorrow evening, there's going to be a panel discussion with businesses who've either had to stop production or work, or they've had to reduce operations. Registration is currently open. Now, we ran a webinar, a panel discussion last week, and it was completely booked out. We had a phenomenal response to it. So if you're interested in going, what I would say to you all is to make sure to register. Now, it starts at 6:30 and it'll be moderated by Helen Downs, who's the CEO of Shannon Chamber, but it'll be with 4 business people from across the country. So it's an LBI event, a Lean Business Ireland event, and the panel speakers are coming from all the regional networks. So just wanted to give that a shout out. So Mark, I suppose if we can get started and directly in with yourself, it was posed last week to me and I know to other regional leaders that, you know, we don't have time for this lean crack. We're in a crisis. We're in a state of trying to get business up and running as much as normal. We're trying to manage teams that are remote, and lean is the last thing we need right now. I wanted to put that to you, if you could maybe counter that, because I know you feel quite passionate about countering that.
Well, I suppose, yeah, you mentioned it to me last week when we were kind of having a brief chat, and I did get passionate about the fact that now really is the time for learning. And I'm not talking about education programs and that. It's about reflection. And we're always struggling when we're in the workplace to look for time. And now we have time. And the idea that yes, there's people that are busy. There's people that are very worried. There are people whose businesses are struggling. Given all of that, the companies that are practicing Lean or Lean Sigma or Six Sigma or any kind of continuous improvement program need to think about how real it is for them, because if it was real, they'd be thinking about what they're going to be doing with it now. What are they doing with this time that they have to maybe reflect? You know, some of the companies that I'm talking with have projects that they have people working on now very specifically for when they restart. And, you know, the optimistic view of this is that we'll restart. The pessimistic view is, oh, when will this end? And really, I suppose, if you're going to think in terms of lean, I really think that it's about continuous improvement. So using the time we have now is the time to be doing lean. It is the time to reflect. Look at what we've learned in the last few weeks. Look at the differences that we have had to adapt to. And they say that there's do something for 21 days, it becomes a new habit. It's when we talk about 5S, we talk about creating new habits. Old habits don't die. You have to create new ones to replace them. We're now in the process of doing things like that. How are we going to actually leverage that if we don't sit and think about it? And I think it's down to the leadership in the companies to reflect on how are they using their resources at the moment. And some of them are under pressure. Some of them will turn around and say, look, I'm so busy at the moment, I can't think. But others in the organization can do some of the thinking maybe for them. How are we going to start back up?
And Mark, just to play devil's advocate on that, I mean, that's all fine and well if you've somewhat of a larger company that has money behind it and that you can put resources behind that. But like if you're a small company, and a small company can be defined from anything from 250 people down, but if you're a small company and you've teams remotely and your operations are working, like really, is training really going to be higher priority, and should it be? And the other part of that then, like, there's only so much training you can do. There's only so much reading and professional development you can do. I mean, if we want to come back to companies, if we want to come back to a positive future, you know, really, is that the best use of the time right now?
Well, I'm not specifically talking about education, right? That's one element of it, but I'm not, that's not what I'm really thinking. I'm thinking about, how are we bringing our businesses back? What are we going to change? What has this taught us? And no matter how big the business is or small the business is, are involved in a small business, it's like, and you can sit back and you can say, okay, am I worried? I'm worried. There's that piece of me that's saying, like, okay, where are the paychecks going to come from? When we come back, are people going to have time to be able to engage in the ancillary things that we've been able to engage in as such? That's the way people see training. They see it as ancillary, whereas we need to embed it in our organizations. So I'm not asking somebody to log in and do a course. I'm saying to somebody, sit back and think about how you're using your resources. Think back, and what are the things that you've always wanted to do? What are the things that you can do in the business that you now have some time to sit back and actually engage in? We talk about burning platforms when we're doing lean. People say, you're driven by a burning platform to innovate and to change. And continuous improvement is about making change for the better, not making change for the worse. So if we have a burning platform, we have it now and we're all sharing it. What are we doing with it? Where's our mind? How are we innovating? If you look at some of the hospitals and what they're doing, and, the National Ambulance Service, they're out there, they're on the front line, but there are people in there and they are innovating. They are doing things differently. They're approaching things differently. And that's on the go. And they are probably at the moment the busiest set of people that I know.
So just explore this burning platform. What exactly do you mean? I have my own understanding of that, but just so there's clarity here. What do you mean by burning platform?
Okay, so World War II finishes and Toyota have nothing. If you have nothing, what do? You have to build with nothing. We say, how do we build? So Toyota built. That's one of the lessons that you'll read about Toyota. They built from nothing. So if we have nothing, how do we build? Well, think about what can we do and in developing our business, starting from scratch. There are some businesses that are going to have to go back to scratch. Some businesses are going to really suffer in this crisis. But that doesn't mean that they can't rebuild. We're going to need to do it together. We're going to need to come back and give value to the customers. I have a firm belief that if you've been giving value to your customers will stay with you. If you haven't, your customers may take an opportunity to question the value they're getting. I think businesses have to start looking at what's the real value. We pay lip service to that value sometimes. We say, okay, we have customers and we'll do this for them, but it suits us. This is never, and lean was never about suiting us. It was about responding to a customer need. And I think that we have to challenge some of the things that we think we're doing for customers when we look at what the customer is now looking for. And that change, and that, it's changing, and it's going to dramatically change, I think, after this, because everyone's going to think differently. There's no such thing as going back to normal after this. I believe that's gone. There'll be a new normal.
And so I suppose in the context of that new normal, what is it? What has changed in the way we're using our lean thinking, or what has changed, what you believe you've seen in how people are using their lean thinking or their lean training? Say the difference between 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. The world was a very different place 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, Mark, than it is today. How have people moved forward, or are they dropping the idea of lean thinking?
Well, I think that inherently in people, they look to do continuous improvement. So what we call it, if we call it lean or we call it Six Sigma or continuous improvement, isn't as relevant. But when they're thinking about it, they're thinking about how can I satisfy my customer? And I think in doing that, they've been challenged with, well, in this environment, what are the lessons we've learned? So if your supply chain has been stopped, if you've had to shut your business, what are you going to do to get back up and running? We don't even know when back up and running is at this point. So sit down and kind of look at, how am I planning? So you take a hejunka, right? Lean thinking of what are we going to, how are we going to plan? Well, you can start that planning now. This is from a senior management point of view. If you've had a strategic plan and it has been, in the proper concept, not in the holistic view, done to look out for 5 to 10 years, and you hadn't anticipated something like this happening, then there's a lesson in that, because something like this could happen. But I've been in strategy sessions with groups and they would say, oh, sure, that'll never happen. And therefore they haven't opened their mind. They've kind of said, yeah, sure, look, we'll be grand. And people are relying on, the management. I'll challenge management here. People are relying on management to see a way out of this. We rely on our government to give us guidance on this, and we're relying on management in companies to do their best, and people will respect that. I think that how people are treated through this crisis by their companies will say an awful lot about where they want to work when we come back. And I think that's really more about what I see as the lean thinking. The inherent, passionate lean thinking is about satisfying your customers, respecting the people that you're working with. And, it's a long-term view. So if you go back to the planning, what are we currently doing in terms of planning? I mean, I know that, we have to sit down, we have to look at what do we do in terms of our business? How do we look at it? When are we back up and running? And everybody has a different requirement. All of our students have different requirements, and we have to try to satisfy them all. But that's our job. It's not a criticism. It's just the way it is. So I think, looking at why do we dismiss lean? I'm not sure that we really dismiss it. We probably feel that we've been focused on maybe some of the wrong things. Maybe the projects that we see as projects weren't as crucial as we actually thought they were to the business.
Yeah. And I suppose, Mark, I really would love to get into, and I will in a moment, in terms of what practical tools can we use. But I suppose just before we get into that, I wanted to pose a question that I was chatting to someone last week who has a number of hundreds of people on staff, a lot in a manufacturing place. They've had to stop manufacturing because of the lockdown, but because of the government subsidy, those hundreds of staff are now at home, more or less being paid. And I mean, that's a lovely idea for lots of people, in terms of, let's pay people and let's leave them at home. But that's not productive or value driven for any company, regardless of its size. So I suppose, how do we ensure that if we don't have work, or what types of projects can we look at, or what types of ways can we look at maximizing the resource that is teams sitting at home wanting to be engaged with work that aren't?
Well, for me, I think you could just set up something that would ask them. I mean, this is where management come in and set the scene for, okay, we have teams. What are the projects that we're planning? What are we getting input from the employees that are now at home, the things that they would like to challenge? And sure, if it comes to making a fixture or a fitting to trying to change something, well, maybe we can't get that done now. But a lot of what we do is, we spin our wheels. We waste time when we're actually in the workplace. And one of the things, in terms of communication, you miss communication when we are not in the workplace, because the little things we do when we're passing somebody and saying, oh, by the way, did you hear about this? Or by the way, did you hear about that? So how many times are people contacting each other at the moment? We probably need to double it, triple it, because, having a conference call once a day sounds like a great idea. But actually, all those corridor conversations and communications are now missing. We need more communication.
And
I think
just staying on the communication, because I know Hilary has raised a really great point there. And I suppose Hilary's question is more in terms of engagement and how do we keep people engaged, and what technology can we use to increase this level of communication and engagement, and to ensure that teams are motivated, because there can't be an element of, whether it's Hillary or it's whoever it is, like Hillary can't make 25 phone calls every day, say, hey, are you all right? You know, and hey, are you getting on okay with X, Y, and Z? Because Hillary's her own work to get on with. So I suppose the question in terms of what tools, techniques, and technologies can we use to ensure that?
Well, I think we're using one of them at the moment. I think that we can all use, well, kind of use Microsoft Teams. And there's Panopto, there's Big Blue Button. There's so many communication, Google Hangouts. You have so many different platforms that we can share on. And, if it means that getting the job done means 25 phone calls in the day, then I'm afraid that's what it takes. I think that it's really down to what works for you. So, I can talk about the fact that, with our clients, we reach out, we say, how are you getting on? What do you need? Right? And it's fine. You're saying, right, that's focus on the customer. But that obviously takes time. We're trying to get things done in the background as well that help kind of keep the show on the road. But it's all with an aim that says, how are we, we're thinking, how can we improve this? How can we improve the communication we do? Because the lessons we learn from that, we will use when we come back. We will have moved on. And I suppose that's where we're starting to form new habits. So the habits we had 4 weeks ago are not the habits we're developing now, and they won't be the habits we have instilled when we go back to work.
And what about visual or virtual planning boards, Mark? Are there any types of tools out there that we can, use to progress that forward from a virtual perspective?
Well, I suppose without being overly specific in terms of softwares, these platforms like Teams, they do have an awful lot of whiteboard project management, communication type functionality built into them. I think that really what you have to do is the senior leaders in companies have to sit down and say, what is our strategy? This is where we need them to stand up and say, what do we want to do? Then you have to look at how are we paying the staff that are within those organizations. So if they have been, sent home, I wouldn't just assume they have the technology to do what we're talking about, but we can bring them together on platforms like this and share the learning. And what I mean by that is now we have time to say to people, well, what causes you problems? Let's get ready for when we go back to see what are the issues that we will tackle. What are the priorities? So these things are very important for us to do now. And that's why I think we need Lean more than ever, because we need to collaborate. We need to work with our colleagues, and we need to develop what we're going to bring to the party when we come back. So that's really why I feel that we can't forget about Lean now. Too busy to do Lean. Lean is a way of doing business. It's not a tool on the side. Yes, there's tools, but it's the holistic approach to business, right? It's about getting the philosophy into your head and saying, yeah, we can do this. We will have a strategy. We will look at our strategy. Companies shouldn't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, if you have a strategy, well, now it's time to check how robust it is. And there's people that are in the companies that, are struggling. Some are probably overloaded depending on the way that things have panned out. You can imagine anybody involved in logistics could be under horrendous pressure at the moment. And those in manufacturing that can't access are pretty, laid back in some ways. It's not that they don't want to work, but they just can't. They want to get into the workplace, but they can't get in there. But what can we have them do instead? What's our plan? If we all sit back and kind of say, oh, look, we'll wait till we're back and we'll see then, we're wasting time. And I think that's why we want to use kind of maybe some of the softer elements of Lean, the kind of collaborative things. But the planning is important. And I think that, the other thing is that there will be a change when we go back. We're not going to be able to collaborate in the same way socially for a long time. I don't think that it's going to be one wave of this, unfortunately. And that's a real problem for when we go back. So what's our plan for that? And these are all things that we do. You know, if you do up a Hejunka box for yourself individually, and you kind of say, here's my day, what are my things that I need to do in the day? What's my plan? And then you expand that to, well, what's the team plan? And you put that together. Now you're starting to collaborate. You can put that up on a platform, or you can do it by email. Emails tend to be flat. You have to interject communication in terms of, you know, video communication or telephone calls. And it is a lot easier with people you know to develop that rapport than it is to develop it online with people you don't know. It just takes a little longer. That's my view, but you can get there. So
last week on the webinar that we had, virtual Gemba walks kind of came up, and I was really intrigued by it. There was a lady from Dawn Farms on, and she had said that what they're getting their teams to do, because they need to adhere to social distancing, is that they send pictures back to a central point, and they send out the pictures then of the walk to everybody. I'm just wondering, in terms of, are there other everyday, you know, like the huddles or the meetings in the morning, are there other things that you would encourage people to do virtually that could still be a huge success?
I think there are. It'll depend on what people's circumstances are. You have to pick what works in the circumstances you're in. So if you have people that are, you know, actively able to get into some form of workplace, then maybe you can do, you know, pictures to do the virtual Gemba. It's a great idea, because then you can start looking at maybe developing the map of what's going on and looking again at, well, what's causing us problems. But even without a virtual map, if you pull people together and say, okay, let's brainstorm, just a simple one, brainstorm, put up the ideas that are causing difficulties for us now that we can reflect on, you know, on my day, these are the things that actually cause me problems, and start looking at, well, are some of those down to our communication processes within the business? And a lot of that, I think, can be worked on offline, because that's stuff that you can plan about how we communicate. What are we learning about meetings at the moment? Okay, other than the fact that we can mute everybody here, we're learning to be silent as we speak and listen, which we don't necessarily do when we go back into meeting rooms. Yeah. So there's a lesson, if we pick that lesson up. And I suppose, to me, the big one that we spoke about was just this lessons learned idea of the idea of Lean or Six Sigma. Reflect on what you're learning and embed it in your thinking going forward. And for that, we have to take the time to think, and we seem to have the time, right? I think we, you know, people like this, the group here are incredibly talented. The people listening in, you all are. You all have ideas. You can share the ideas. You know, I mean, Rob was talking about it last week. We all learn from the different ideas that come up. The challenge is, if you turn around and you say, "Oh, I haven't got time for Lean," what have you got time for? Doing the business. Well, isn't that what Lean is about? It's about doing the business. What's the focus of Lean? To make improvement. Why are we making improvement? To make money. I mean, that's the bottom line. The value is in the money being made for the business. We only do that if we satisfy the customer. How are we satisfying our customers at the moment? When we go back, what will they look for? What's the challenge? Where's the opportunity? But where's the value? And I think that's really important to understand. So what is it really? If you ask your staff and you get them together and you say, okay, what is real value for the customer? Now that you're looking at it without the pressure necessarily of the day-to-day workload on some staff, give them the time to think. Give them time to, if necessary, upskill in different areas. Guide them through this time. They're the companies that are practicing Lean, not the companies that just said, right, off you go, we'll see you whenever. That's not Lean. And we have to have time for Lean in that context.
Do you know, Mark, I think you've made so many incredibly valid points there. And I think I just love that that value point and making sure that the value is both ways. So looking and planning in terms of how are we ensuring that the customers either we go back to or the customers we continue to serve right now are getting the value they need. Because, I mean, I was chatting to a customer yesterday evening and not sure if this if this work will happen either during the COVID-19 or afterwards. And they were looking for something what was already defined as the new norm, you know, in terms of how do we deliver our service in a way that's going to be continually compliant, whether there's a COVID-19 or not, you know, how, and I suppose, you know, there's looking at the value from the now customer who has become the future customer, you know, but equally looking at the staff members that we have. And I know from our business in particular, we're very blessed with the team we have. We've very engaged members of our staff, and I know everyone here who's on in front of me, I know you all have engaged teams as well. So we as team leaders need to be able to look at how are we offering a value to them so they can feel engaged and they can feel like they're contributing and have an opportunity to engage. And I just think that's really great. What, you know, and I suppose you saying that, but also Rob had put up there about what they are doing. And Rob, thanks a million. Rob represented and flew the flag for the Southwest Lean Forum last week. And one point he meant, and it was so simple, but so incredibly wonderful, was the question board at the entrance. I just think that it's a genius little point, because what it allows for people to still stay engaged, but adheres to this COVID-19 restrictions in terms of social distancing, but equally, you know, because they have staff coming at different intervals, you know, they're not meeting. So I just love the collaboration, how people are being so creative forward. Did you want to come in on that, Mark?
Yeah, I think that, you know, they're the activities that come from having a lean thinking process in place, because you're immediately moving into the mode of, okay, how can we handle this? Not, oh my God. So the preparedness that goes with organizations that are genuinely engaged in lean thinking is very powerful, right? And I think that's really where it comes from in terms of the ideas that Rob had and implemented. And, you know, those things are so important. And it is the small things. I think that, you know, a lot of people see lean in a plan, do, check, act, A3 project, bang, right? It's almost like taking, you know, Kanban and saying, right, we've done lean, we've got Kanbans in. And most people, you know, when I run into people, they don't realize Kanban is a signal, that it's not just like, you know, it's not a shelf, it's a signal. And therefore, we don't get it. You know, we think we get it. And we have to go and we have to dig a little bit deeper. And then we have to say, well, okay, what can we learn? How can we apply things differently going forward? And I think that the genuine companies that have engaged in lean are the ones that are going to come out of this in a better position, similar to the idea of recovery from the last recession. You know, I mean, there's a lot of companies that went to the wall, and big companies, right? And other companies were set to survive. And, you know, this idea of responding tact time that we talk about in lean, you know, not having huge inventories in a warehouse. There's no value in an inventory that's sitting in a warehouse that nobody wants. It's not moving. It's cash flow that is dead to the company. And, you know, this idea that you can actually play, you know, from a management point of view, and this is all the way to the top in terms of senior management, the idea that we have to look at a 3-month horizon and we have to win by quarter, by quarter, by quarter, by quarter, because we have to satisfy the stock market. Like, really, you know, that's encouraging very much non-lean thinking, because lean is a lot longer thinking than that. What's going to have us survive for 400 years? You know, and there are companies that are there that long. And they think very differently. They see problems come and go, but they work through them. They have suppliers and supply bases that they rely on as partners, not just the next vendor. And they're the type of things that we should be thinking about now. Who's helping us? Who's not helping us? And it is, you know, let's be fair now, it is a cutthroat business. I'm not against that, but there also has to be this idea of, you know, loyalty. We tend to lose sight of that when we're chasing the dollar. And, you know, I make a comment, I suppose, in a lot of classes that from management's point of view, when we're looking at the 3-month horizon, it's like playing soccer as a child. You know, you keep your eye on the ball because you don't want to lose sight of it and look silly if you take a swing at fresh air. But it's, you know, it's the better players that get their head up and they're looking around to see where is the pass. And they're the brilliant players. And that's what we should be aspiring to as lean organizations, getting our head up. And management's role is to make sure they have their head up. Everyone else has got their head down in the day-to-day doing. Management hide there sometimes. They need to get their head up and make decisions. And to me, that's something that I think we have to take on board now. You know, those companies will survive very well. But of course, you know, I'm looking around the screen here and I'm talking to the converted. So we need to get the message a little bit further than this.
Do you know, Mark, this is, for me anyway, it's been very selfishly, very, very valuable. I hope everybody else has. I'm conscious of people's time. Senan is constantly sending me little reminders there that I'm gone over time. I do want to, so anyone, we've gone to 35 minutes. Anyone who needs to leave, please feel free. But I just want to give a nod to Brendan, who has very kindly given some insight into terms of what they're doing. Brendan has said that, and probably you've all seen it, but he's just said that there's a call now for being continuously agile. But, you know, Senan, you picked up on the fact that he said that so many opportunities to improve how we do business, we will need to retain many of these. And Brendan has just talked about how they're changing on the ground, and if Brendan was up for it, I think everybody would love to hear, maybe in a different session, Brendan, how are things going there from lean in a very demanding environment. But I just think some of his very valid points, and Brendan said he's happy to share. So we'll definitely organise that for sure. And Rebecca is dealing with supply chains, and of course she's at least lecturing in them as well as dealing with them, Rebecca. And I know you have a wonderful insight. And this is the beauty and why I love being involved with this forum, is because we've always worked together in a way that this COVID-19 is encouraging the rest of the country, is we're all in this together. Let's learn from each other and let's try and move forward together. So Mark, I just want to thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your insight. If everybody can give me a thumbs up, I think that it was a great session. I think Mark, I mean, you know, well done. You did a great job there. Does anybody have any further questions before I let Mark go?
I have a call forward.
Oh, we're just going to unmute people there, and if anyone has any questions they want to very quickly. No? All right. Guys, thanks for this will be recorded.
Well done, Mark.
And thanks Máiréad.
Yeah, thanks Mark and Máiréad. It was actually it was hugely informative. It was really, really good.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mind yourself.
Take care.
Stay safe.
Bye.